Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 8 Part 16 based on novel. So let's start. In the valley, the enormous monster snake fell to the ground with a bang. Fresh blood flowed, dyeing the ground red as a bloody scent stealthily spread. Ling Qingzhu's face was cool and indifferent as she landed from the air. After which, she arrived at the Supreme Purity Celestial Pond. A jade-like hand brushed apart the water, and slowly washed the bloody longsword. Lin Dong involuntarily rubbed his nose while he watched this scene. It seemed that Ling Qingzhu was very embarrassed and furious this time. However, he could understand why. If it was someone else, Lin Dong was certain that his fate would be similar to that of the monster snake. It was likely that the only man in this world who could continue to challenge her baseline in such a manner was Lin Dong. The messy and unclear relationship between the two had clearly made it impossible for them to view each other as ordinary people. This was also the reason why Ling Qingzhu was tolerating of Lin Dong's various excessive actions. Splash! Water flowed down the longsword and landed into the pond, creating many ripples. Ling Qingzhu lowered her head and gazed at the face that was so beautiful that it could cause the downfall of nations reflected within the ripples. Her pearly white teeth involuntarily bit her lips. It seemed there were still some remnant traces of the warmth from earlier on her lips. That fellow seemed to constantly shatter the calmness of her still water-like heart. Ling Qingzhu was somewhat baffled. The matter 5 years ago had undoubtedly messed up both of their original paths. She had once thought that given her character, she should be able to achieve the state her master had described to her, the state of having her heart as calm as a mirror and being completely untroubled. However, that preposterous incident had caused a tiny imperfection to appear on her bright mirror-like heart. Ling Qingzhu had used 5 years to weaken and bury away that tiny imperfection. And just when she had thought that she was about to completely forget it, that somewhat fuzzy figure was accompanied by a storm as it staggered with exceptional perseverance and once again barged into her sights. The young man from back then had unknowingly already started chasing her footsteps. He had transformed tremendously during these 5 years. However, that exact same stubbornness from 5 years ago had not been erased with the flow of time. 5 years ago, a young man had once silently endured in a miserable manner before Lin Langtian. Now, he had become the most outstanding disciple amongst the younger generation of Dao sect. His achievements could even be considered top-notch amongst the younger generation of the entire Eastern Xian region. Such improvement and metamorphosis was something that even Ling Qingzhu had difficulty ignoring at this moment. She was aware that it would perhaps no longer be easy for her to expel this person who had barged into her world again. Ling Qingzhu's expression was somewhat complicated as she gently pursed her lips. After which, she heard the soft sounds of footsteps being transmitted from behind her. Her delicate body stiffened unnoticeably. The complicated expression in her eyes also quickly withdrew. Lin Dong walked over from behind. After which, he sat down beside Ling Qingzhu. He tilted his head and watched the side of her enchantingly bewitching face. Suddenly, he smiled and said, "Do you still remember the words I spoke 5 years ago?" "I've forgotten." Ling Qingzhu lowered her long eyelashes and replied indifferently. "I knew of the gap between you and me in the past. Therefore, I struggled with everything I had. After you left back then, I also left Yang City by myself. After which, I honed and trained myself in the outside world. At that time, I only had 2 aims. To kill Lin Langtian, and to stand before you again." The young man raised his head beside the pond and looked at the somewhat sinisterly black sky before laughing. "I am not trying to boast to you. All that I wish to convey is that your judgment of me is ultimately wrong. I have achieved what you had deemed impossible." Ling Qingzhu's delicate finger skimmed over the longsword. Soon after, she turned her head and watched the brilliantly smiling young man. After a long silence, she finally spoke softly. "You have struggled for 5 years because of those words? You should be aware that there were many times that you might have failed on that journey. There will be no chance for you to redo everything again should that happen. But I eventually succeeded." Lin Dong stretched his waist. He had roamed the great desolate province, charged out of the great Yang Empire and into the 100 Empire War. Finally, he had entered Eastern Xian region. There might be many dangers, but he had ultimately succeeded. Back then, I said that a woman I have slept with will definitely be mine. These words might appear a little vulgar now that I think about it, but... Lindong smiled. His eyes stared directly at Ling Qingzhu and said, "You are my woman." Swoosh! Water splashed and the brilliant longsword was accompanied by a chilling aura as it pointed at Lindong's throat. Ling Qingzhu looked at him. Her voice was cold as she spoke. "Do you truly think that I will not kill you?" Lindong did not say anything. He stared at Ling Qingzhu. Those eyes were without fear. There was no trace of any intention to weaken his position. Ling Qingzhu gritted her teeth. Finally, she put away her longsword. She clenched her hand and said, "It is best for you not to say such words. If these words reach my teacher's ears, she will kill you even if you are a Dao sect disciple." Lindong frowned. Every sect master of the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace must train the Dao of their hearts. A heart must be as clear as a mirror, and not a single speck of dust will be tolerated. Given her character, if my master knew about us, she will definitely intervene and help me remove the imperfection in my heart. Ling Qingzhu watched Lindong and said, "You are that speck of dust, the imperfection in my heart. Dao of the heart. It is heterodoxy." Lindong knitted his brows tightly. Immediately, he looked at Ling Qingzhu and said, "In your opinion, how should this imperfection in your heart be removed?" Ling Qingzhu was clearly startled by this question. Originally, she thought that there was no need to think about the answer. At this moment, however, she had difficulty speaking under Lindong's gaze. Hence, she could only shake her head while feeling lost as she replied, "I do not know. I do not know if these words of yours are an attempt to get me to back off. However, my determination will never change. If your teacher wishes to stop me, I will wait until I am stronger than your teacher, before directly snatching you from the hands of the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace." Lindong watched Ling Qingzhu, who had given the uncertain reply. A smile surfaced on his face as he grinned and declared. Ling Qingzhu felt neither able to laugh nor cry in the face of these words. She somewhat helplessly shook her head as she replied, "Even the sect master of your Dao sect, Yin Xuanzi, has to be polite to my teacher when he sees her. You should stop setting random goals." Lindong smiled and he did not say anything more on this topic. It was similarly possible for him to feel the complicated emotions Ling Qingzhu had towards him. This was already pretty decent. At the very least, she did not possess that indifference and alienation that she used to treat other men when facing him. From a certain point of view, this was quite a good start. "Thank you for what you did at the bottom of the pond earlier." Ling Qingzhu quietly sighed in relief when she saw the fearless Lindong had actually moderated himself. Soon after, she changed the topic and said, "Why did you provoke that thing?" Lindong frowned slightly. If Ling Qingzhu's intention was to heal herself, she could clearly do it at the middle of the pond. There was no need for her to intentionally head to the bottom of the pond. That skeleton should have some relations to my Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. I received calls from it after entering the pond. However, I did not expect that it actually intended on snatching my life force. Ling Qingzhu bunched her eyebrows together as she explained. Relations? Lindong was startled. That skeleton's existence was clearly far older than the Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. Therefore, it was likely that there was no direct relation between the two. From the looks of it, it was probably some relation in martial arts or secret arts. No wonder that spirit emblem entered your body. Ling Qingzhu nodded. She could sense the addition of the majestic spirit emblem within her body. This was considered a lucky opportunity for her. It seems like this Supreme Purity Celestial Pond will lose its powers in the future. Lindong gazed at the Supreme Purity Celestial Pond with some regret. The rainbow colors within it were gradually fading. The reason this Supreme Purity Celestial Pond had appeared in unique Devil region was clearly due to the protection of the ancient skeleton. Now that the skeleton had turned into dust, this place will likely once again be eroded by demonic chi in the future. Ling Qingzhu nodded. Soon after, she stood up and said, "Let's leave." She had already achieved her goal for this trip. Clearly, there was no point for them to remain in this place. Lin Dong smiled and nodded when he heard this. He waved his sleeve, before a black light shot out from the distance. Finally, it was kept in his Qiankun bag. It was the demon corpse that he had used to lure the monster snake away earlier. The two prepared to leave after the demon corpse was kept. However, Ling Qingzhu had just moved her body when she suddenly became startled. She beckoned with her hand, and a golden light shot out from the space in front of her. Finally, it entered her hand. "This is our 9 Heaven Supreme Purity Palace's Yuan spirit message." What happened? Ling Qingzhu received the golden light as her brows knitted slightly. Finally, her finger pressed on her smooth forehead. A change appeared on her face a moment later. What happened? Something happened to your people? Lin Dong asked in surprise when he saw this. No? Ling Qingzhu shook her head. Her clear eyes looked at Lin Dong. After a brief hesitation, she said, "It seems like Yuan Kang and the rest have attacked the Dao sect disciples." When Ling Qingzhu's words sounded out, she could see the smile on Lin Dong's face disappear bit by bit, before a frightening gloominess slowly appeared. At the same time, an intensely cold murderous desire also surged. What happened? Lin Dong asked in a low voice. It seems like the Yuan Gate and Dao sect disciples met 2 days ago. They ended up in a dispute because of some friction. After that, Yuan Kang and the rest attacked, Ling Qingzhu said. No matter how one looked at it, this matter was likely due to the Yuan Gate's provocations. After all, the Dao sect disciples were weaker. Moreover, their main pillar of strength, Lin Dong, was absent. Even if they met Yuan Gate, it was likely that they would give in. Therefore, the reason that things had developed into such a state was most likely the Yuan Gate disciples' intention. After both parties exchanged blows, the Dao sect disciples have been progressing towards the teleporting formation area while Yuan Gate gave chase. It seems like the latter can no longer control themselves. Did my Dao sect disciples suffer any injuries or death? Lin Dong's eyes were dark and chilly as he inquired. Chen Gui is helping Dao sect disciples. He has temporarily stopped Yuan Kang and is shouldering quite a great deal of pressure. However, it is rumored that some injuries and deaths have still occurred. Ling Qingzhu hesitated for a moment, but finally she did not hide anything. Bang! A brutal and evil aura suddenly surged out from Lin Dong's body when those words sounded out. His expression had also become exceptionally savage. It appeared as though he could hear the miserable cries from just before those Dao sect disciples died, as well as the proud arrogant laughter from the Yuan Gate disciples. Those trash! Lin Dong's body trembled slightly. His expression was ferocious. He knew that this day would arrive sooner or later, but he did not expect that Yuan Gate would be so impatient and begin their attack at such a time. Currently, the Yuan Gate and Dao sect disciples have been continuously fighting for a couple of days. Should we immediately hurry to the teleportation formation area? Ling Qingzhu softly asked. Lin Dong nodded. He lifted his head and looked towards the dark north. A scarlet light faintly flickered in his eyes, causing his ferocious face to appear exceptionally frightening. He was currently unaware of the exact number of dead and injured Dao sect disciples at this moment. However, he knew that if some accident was to occur to Qingtan, Ying Huan, and a few others, he would definitely massacre the Yuan Gate disciples. Not even one will remain. A brutal bloodthirsty aura spread out from Lin Dong's body. That brutality was even greater than the demons in Unique Devil region. How much time do we need to reach the teleportation formation from here? Lin Dong asked in a gloomy voice. 5 days. But if we hurry at full speed, we should be able to catch up to them in 3 days. Ling Qingzhu thought for a moment before replying. Let's go. Lin Dong's body shook slightly, as the green dragon wings extended from his back. Without saying anything more, he flapped his wings, turning into a flash of green light that tore through the darkness, and swiftly rushed towards the distant sky at lightning speed. Ling Qingzhu watched Lin Dong, who was covered all over by a savage aura as he left. Her hand involuntarily tensed, as a trace of worry flashed across the depths of her pupils. Since the beginning of this great sect competition, she was aware that Yuan Gate and Dao Sect would definitely never come to a compromise. Dao Sect had suffered great losses during the last great sect competition. Even the great senior sister of Sky Hall had been surrounded and killed by Yuan Gate. The battle this time around would likely surpass the previous one. In the previous great sect competitions, Yuan Gate would always gain the upper hand in the battle with the Dao Sect disciples. This had also boosted the Yuan Gate disciples' arrogance. However, this time around, it was a little different. In this great sect competition, the Yuan Gate disciples' strength might appear to be stronger than the Dao Sect disciples on the surface, but Dao Sect had Lin Dong this time. This person was usually good-natured. However, he would immediately turn into a murderous devil if someone touched his sensitive spot. He would become the greatest variable in this great sect competition. If the Yuan Gate was to act recklessly, it was likely that they would have to pay quite a terrifying price this time around. Ling Qingzhu recalled Lin Dong's ferocious face, which was filled with a savage aura earlier. She was aware that the young man, who was helpless while being chased and attacked by her, was about to explode. It was likely that there would be a bloodbath in this great sect competition. Ling Qingzhu sighed softly. Immediately, she ceased thinking about this matter. A green lotus formed under her feet. After which, she turned into a bright ray of light that quickly chased after Lin Dong. Swoosh! 2 bright rays of light flashed across the dark sky at a shocking speed. The wind pressure from their fast speed shook the ground below, and formed a long scar over it. These 2 bright rays of light were naturally Lin Dong and Ling Qingzhu, who had exited the depths of unique devil region. They had already traveled for 2 whole days. The both of them did not even stop and rest for a moment during these 2 days. Green light covered Lin Dong's body. The green dragon wings on his back would flap occasionally, and his speed would soar greatly. At this moment, his face was still covered with a dark and solemn expression. They had met others who were participating in the great sect competition along the way. Lin Dong was able to obtain more information about the fight between the Yuan Gate and Dao Sect disciples from them. In the battle between the 2 parties, one party was chasing, while the other was retreating. The ones chasing were naturally the Yuan Gate disciples, and the ones continuously withdrawing were naturally the Dao Sect disciples. Clearly, Dao Sect was using all of its strength to defend against the continuous chase and ruthless attacks by Yuan Gate. They fought while retreating. Perhaps one should say that they were still bitterly waiting for the return of the person who could truly lead them to victory against Yuan Gate. Lin Dong, we are about to reach the teleportation formation area. Ling Qingzhu looked into the distance, before turning towards Lin Dong beside her and commented. Yes. Lin Dong nodded but did not say anything else. If it was in the past, he might even tease Ling Qingzhu a little. However, he did not have the mood to do so now. Ling Qingzhu also understood Lin Dong's current state. Therefore, she pondered for a moment, before speaking. I am aware that a fight between you and the disciples of Yuan Gate is unavoidable. However, you should be careful of Yuan Kang. Oh? Lin Dong's eyes moved. He frowned and looked at Ling Qingzhu before saying, he should be at the initial profound life stage, right? In the current great sect competition, it was likely that there were only 3 people amongst the younger generation who had truly reached the initial profound life stage. They were Yuan Kang, Ling Qingzhu, and Chen Gui. An initial profound life stage expert was indeed extremely difficult to deal with. However, when the time came for them to exchange blows, Lin Dong would make him pay a price that he would never be able to imagine. Yuan Kang's strength is indeed at the initial profound life stage. However, in order to become the leader of the 3 little kings, he also possessed many tactics. Even I feel a faint sense of danger when facing him. Therefore, he is definitely not as easy to deal with as he appears on the surface. You need to be careful when you end up exchanging blows with him. Ling Qingzhu muttered. Lin Dong's eyes hardened. Ling Qingzhu's strength was similar to Yuan Kang. However, the latter was able to cause her to feel danger. It seems like this Yuan Kang was not so simple. Many thanks. If you did not accompany me to find the supreme purity celestial pond, Yuan Gate would have likely not attacked at this time. Ling Qingchu's eyes had some apology flashing across them. If I was around, they might not have dragged it out for so long. Lin Dong shook his head. His eyes looked into the distance, as a brutal aura once again rose within them. The reason they are chasing in this manner is likely because they plan on forcing me out. Ha ha, it seems like Yuan Kang already hates me to the core. Alright, since you are so anxious to force me to show myself, I shall gladly accompany all of you this time around. However, the stakes that I play with are usually quite high. Let's use our lives as stakes this time. A bloodthirsty savageness climbed onto Lin Dong's lips. A trace of insanity was vaguely present. Unique Devil Region Teleportation Formation Area. This was a vast land that was filled with rocks. Many mountains of various sizes stood around the place like humps. An evil aura faintly scattered from the mountains, before enveloping the land. At this moment, this messy and rocky terrain was already filled with a sea of people. Countless eyes looked backwards, as rushing wind sound appeared from all directions. Soon after, hundreds of people covered in a bloody aura appeared in their sights. They are from Dao sect. Some voices immediately sounded as everyone looked at this large group of people. However, there seemed to be a sigh in their tones. Word of the fierce battle between the Dao sect and Yuan Gate disciples had clearly already spread across the entire unique devil region like a whirlwind. Stop! Ying Xiaoxiao suddenly halted at the front of the Dao sect disciples. She waved her hand and cried out in an icy voice. Swoosh! The large number of disciples behind her immediately halted. Alertness surged out in their eyes. Hee hee. A faint and indifferent laughter was suddenly emitted from a mountain to their front when the Dao sect disciples halted. Finally, rushing wind sounds appeared. Numerous figures swept over from all directions. After which, they formed a semicircle that completely blocked the road towards the front. Yuan Kang. Yin Xiaoxiao's eyes were ice-cold as she watched the three individuals standing at the peak of the mountain. Her jade-like fist immediately tightened. It is unexpected that that person still refuses to show himself even after we forced all of you to such an extent. Ha ha, his tolerance is really remarkable. It seems like he has completely lost all the arrogance he showed at the start. However, since he refuses to reveal himself, my fury can only be taken out on all of you. Atop the mountain, Yuan Kang smiled and looked at the Dao sect disciples in the distance. A sinister murderous intent slowly surged in his eyes. A faint evil aura spread across the spacious rocky terrain. At this moment, it seemed as though the air itself had solidified. This spot was not far from the teleportation formation to leave unique devil region. Therefore, it could be considered to be near the end of the great sect competition. However, many people knew that the real show had just begun. Competition was present amongst the 8 super sects of Eastern Xian region. All of them considered each other as opponents. However, they usually exercised some restraint. The only exception was Yuan Gate and Dao sect. As the strongest super sect in Eastern Xian region, the actions of Yuan Gate were naturally a little overbearing. This caused the remaining super sects to feel some dissatisfaction. However, there was nothing they could do. After all, Yuan Gate was simply too powerful and its 3 sect masters were all renowned individuals in Eastern Xian region. Although Dao sect was a little inferior to Yuan Gate, they were still one of the 8 super sects, and their foundations were naturally not weak. There had always been a grudge between these 2 parties. However, the real reason this grudge had grown to such an extent was because of a monstrous genius known as Ju Tong, that Dao sect produced 100 years ago. Outsiders did not really know much about what had happened back then. All they knew was that ever since Dao sect produced that individual called Ju Tong, all the prestige of the younger generation from that time seemed to have accumulated on him. So much so that even Yuan Gate's 3 little kings from that time were all defeated by Ju Tong, and the Yuan Gate disciples were completely dispirited during that great sect competition. Amongst those 3 little kings, 1 had been killed, 1 injured, and the last was sent fleeing. That particular great sect competition was likely the one time where the Dao sect disciples felt the proudest. Although they had paid a significant price, it was not worth mentioning when compared to the losses suffered by Yuan Gate. Something else seemed to have occurred after the competition. Suddenly, a shocking news spread. The Dao sect disciple, Zhu Tong, had charged into Yuan Gate alone, killed 3 great elders of Yuan Gate and turned the place upside down. Finally, he directly forced a Yuan Gate sect master to put aside his pride and take action. Only then was Zhu Tong killed. This matter had undoubtedly stirred an earth-shattering commotion in Eastern Xian region at that time. Everyone was stunned by Zhu Tong's boldness and ferocity. Just how strong must one be in order to do something as earth-shaking as charging into the Yuan Gate headquarters alone? Zhu Tong's death had also stirred the fury of Dao sect. At that time, Zhu Tong undoubtedly possessed an extremely respected position in the hearts of the Dao sect disciples. Hence, when news that he was killed by a Yuan Gate sect master reached Dao sect, the Dao sect disciples were completely furious. Cries of revenge rose within the sect. At that time, Yuan Gate and Dao sect were at the brink of a war. Everyone were clearly aware of just how tragic it would be when 2 super sects waged a war. However, the war ultimately did not erupt. Under the suppression of Dao sect master Ying Xuanzi and some of the upper echelons, this matter ultimately died down. However, bone-deep hatred would not diminish with the flow of time. Instead, it would only burrow deeper into one's heart. Hence, a war between Yuan Gate and Dao sect might not have occurred, but the relationship between both parties was quite terrible. This had resulted in both parties being unable to be at peace each time they met in subsequent great sect competitions. An example was the last great sect competition. The Yuan Gate disciples still attacked despite Dao sect admitting defeat. They surrounded and killed the great senior sister of Sky Hall back then, Wang Yang's blood sister. These grudges and enmity accumulated again and again, until now. Many people in the sky and on the mountains did not belong to Yuan Gate or Dao sect. They watched the familiar face-off in the distant rocky terrain, as all of them sighed quietly. It seemed like this great sect competition was destined not to be a peaceful one. However, they wondered if Dao sect would become as miserable as they had been in the past. The Dao sect disciples stared at the Yuan Gate disciples in an unfriendly manner while everyone else looked on. Those eyes of the Dao sect disciples contained a rich hatred. Ying Xiaoxiao's face was frosty as she watched the situation in front of her and clenched her hand tightly. She was aware that the so-called peaceful passing was no longer possible. A great battle between both parties was inevitable. Yuan Kang, it is merely a great sect competition. There is no need to do things in such a manner, right? Chen Gui frowned. He looked at Yuan Kang in the distant sky and spoke in a deep voice. Ha ha, I did not wish for things to develop to this extent as well. However, I cannot stop the repeated provocations of some individuals. If I do not resort to such means, others might think that our Yuan Gate is easily bullied. Yuan Kang softly chuckled. However, since you, Chen Gui, has spoken, I must give you some face. As long as they are willing to surrender Lin Dong and let us punish him, we will not attack them. What do you say? In your dreams? Ying Huan's pretty face was immediately covered in frost as she cried out coldly. Senior brother Chen Gui, why bother wasting words with him? Hand over brother Lin Dong? I might as well hand you over. Qingtan rolled her eyes at Chen Gui and said. Chen Gui helplessly let out a bitter laugh. I am not the one who asked to hand over brother Lin Dong. His gaze once again looked towards Yuan Kang after his words sounded. He spread his hands and said, looks like there is nothing to discuss then. Humph, you truly do not know how to appreciate kindness. Ying Xiaoxiao, you should be aware of the hefty price your Dao sect will have to pay in an all-out battle. Are you certain that you are willing to do this for Lin Dong? Lei Qian laughed coldly. Who do you think you are? You want my Dao sect to pay a hefty price? I don't believe that your side will end up any better. Wang Yang's eyes turned dark and chilly as he cried out. Even a defeated foe dares to act so arrogant. It looks like your lucky escape last time has caused your confidence to soar significantly, huh? Lei Qian stared at Wang Yang and laughed ferociously. You can come and try me. Wang Yang's face was filled with ferocity. Majestic Yuan power spread from his body. His strength was actually far stronger than an ordinary expert at the peak of the 9 Yuan Nirvana stage. There seemed to be some vague traces of life qi mixed within it. Over this period of time, Wang Yang and Ying Xiaoxiao had refined a profound life pill, and a faint life qi was born within their bodies. This enabled them to touch the door to the profound life stage. They were much stronger than before. You have actually improved a little. However, with just this faint bit of life qi, you still do not possess the qualification to act so arrogantly before me. Lei Qian had clearly also sensed that Wang Yang had become much stronger. However, he still laughed coldly and ridiculed. What do you say now? The foldable fan in Little Spirit King Lingzhen's hand fanned gently. The corners of his mouth formed an icy smile as he watched the Dao sect disciples. After which, he looked towards Yuan Kang and inquired. What do I say? Since they refused to hand that person over, they should not blame us for being merciless. Yuan Kang replied faintly. There was a rich murderous intent surging in his eyes as he spoke. They had suffered multiple losses at Lin Dong's hands during this great sect competition. Even the pure Yuan treasure that they had originally obtained in the Burning Sky ancient stash was lost because of Lin Dong's interference. If it was not because they were quick to flee, it was likely that they would have been killed by the red-robed person. Such a loss was clearly difficult for the extremely proud Yuan Kang to endure. Moreover, the Dao sect disciples had always been beaten until they no longer had spirit by Yuan Gate during the past great sect competitions. If any accident occurred this time, it was likely that even their reputation amongst the Yuan Gate disciples would be damaged. In that case, let's do it. The icy smile on Lingzhen's mouth became even wider when he heard this. He was already anxiously waiting to see the panic and hopeless expressions on these Dao sect disciples. Yuan Kang smiled indifferently. After which, the three of them slowly stepped forward as majestic Yuan power surged out. In an instant, it appeared as though all the Yuan power in the area had vaguely started to boil. The surrounding onlookers felt their hearts pound a little harder when they watched this scene. They knew that Yuan Gate was about to attack. Huff. Chen Gui let out a deep breath. After which, he stared at Yuan Kang and took a step forward. I will stop Yuan Kang. Thank you, brother Chen Gui. Ying Xiaoxiao felt some gratitude when she heard this. Lin Dong was currently not around. All they could do was rely on Chen Gui to stop Yuan Kang. News of the situation here has already spread throughout the entire unique devil region. Lin Dong should have received it. As long as we hold on, he will be able to hurry here. Chen Gui hesitated for a moment but still ended up nodding. He had seen Lin Dong's battle with Lei Qian. The former was indeed quite powerful. However, there was still quite a big gap when compared to Yuan Kang. Hence, he did not really understand the confidence underlying Ying Xiaoxiao's group. Nevertheless, he did not say anything more despite his incomprehension. I will deal with Lei Qian. Wang Yang held a heavy black sword in his hand and grunted. Ying Xiaoxiao nodded. After which, she raised her head. Her eyes contained some chilliness as they locked onto the little spirit King Lingzhen. She said, leave Lingzhen to me. Huan Huan, Qing Yi, the two of you will lead the other Dao sect disciples and stop the remaining Yuan Gate disciples. Ying Huan Huan and Qing Yi nodded heavily. The former extended her jade-like hand as the crimson heavenly phoenix zither appeared with a flash. My fellow disciples. Ying Xiaoxiao slowly inhaled a breath of air that seemed to have become icy cold because of the tense atmosphere. Her eyes rotated and swept over all the Dao sect disciples' faces. Please strengthen our Dao sect. Wild excitement surged into the eyes of all the Dao sect disciples at this moment. At the same time, an unusually deep roar resounded in an orderly fashion. Strengthen our Dao sect. This video will end here.